The Screams Are Getting Louder. Original horror by One More Nightmare. I don't have long. Hours, maybe less. It's nothing but darkness outside, and the screams are getting louder. I need to warn you. God, I hope you listen. I've been writing horror stories on Reddit for a few years now, but I've been struggling to get that one breakthrough story, with my best story clocking up about 100 upvotes. I don't write for clout, but because I love it. But I will admit, I was envious of the other writers who were breaking 1,000 or more upvotes. I just wanted to experience that, just once. So, I started trawling the internet for inspiration for my next story. I was determined to make it big, but unique. I was looking for lesser known cryptids, haunted locations, abduction stories, anything I could find that would give my story a fresh twist. But nothing was good enough. I decided to check out my local library on my lunch break to see if anything was there that could inspire me. I went straight to the non-fiction section, grabbed a bunch of old books on cryptids, UFOs and ghost sightings, and was hopeful that something here would inspire me. So I started towards the librarian's desk to check the books out. Then, behind me, a small bang sound made me jump. I turned around to see an old book had fallen onto the wooden floor. I figured I must have loosened it when I grabbed one of the other books, so figured I should be the one to put it back. I placed my stack of books to the side and bent down to pick up the book from the floor. I don't know how to exactly say this next part, but as soon as I touched the book, I was flooded with emotions like a cold shower running over me. I was happy, sad, scared and angry. I was excited, had the chills, and nervous. I stood up slowly, soaked in sweat from the emotional rush I was experiencing, and turned the book over in my hand. It was a hardback, brown in colour, and looked to be really, really old. The cover felt like leather but was lumpy, not smooth, and had random stitched ridges running through it. It was heavier than it looked, and I could smell a musty odour that I couldn't quite place. And it was warm. I should have put it back then. Hell, I should have just dropped it back on the floor and walked away. But I didn't. Flipping the book from front to back, I noticed there was no book title or author details, nor was there the normal book details and library barcode attached to the spine. I opened it and slowly thumbed through the first few pages. Its pages were yellowed and darkened, likely because of its age. The paper felt thicker, coarser, and the texture was rougher to the touch than the smooth, polished pages of newer books. The ink was a little faded and smudged and was a dark red colour. There was no book name or author details on the first few pages, but the third page had an image on it that made the hairs on my neck stick up and my heart skip a beat. Spread across the 2 pages, drawn in dark red and black ink, was the most terrifying, demon-like creature I had ever seen. Its face was depicted to have exposed muscles, with little otherworldly tendrils poking out between the overlapping muscles. Its mouth, which spread from ear to ear, was wide in a terrifying snarl, exposing multiple rows of dagger-like teeth and a fork-like tongue. 3 crooked horns sat upon its head, uneven in size and shape, the mismatched deformities somehow making it even more menacing. It had 2 sets of arms, one set that reached out in front of it and ended in 3 sharp claws, and the other that seemed to double as front legs that ended in sharp, foot-long daggers. But it was the creature's eyes that truly sent shivers down my spine. Multiple orbs, each one a different size, dotted its elongated head, similar to that of a spider. And even though this was just a drawing, The eyes seemed to follow me as I moved the book around. Reading the description below the image, I found the name of the demon. I was really into demonology, and I was confident I had come across most demons that had ever been written about, but I had never heard of this one. I am not sharing its name with you, as I don't want anyone to try and find information on this demon, only to find themselves in the same position I am currently in. Slamming the book closed, I knew I had found the subject of my next story. This would be my breakthrough story, I thought, as I slipped the book into my backpack and left the library. I couldn't check the book out after all. There was no tags on it. The afternoon shift at work dragged on, and I couldn't stop thinking about the book. As soon as 5 p.m. came around, I shut my work PC down and left the office without saying a word to my colleagues. Heading straight home, I pulled out my laptop and started writing. The story was flowing. My new subject was perfect. Empty cans of Red Bull started to pile up on my desk as I wrote a tale darker than any I had done before. 5 hours and half a dozen Red Bulls later, I had written around 4,000 words and was feeling great. I decided then that I would shop the story around to publishers, as I could already see the story arcing off into a series and spin-offs. This was my golden ticket. I stretched my arms up over my head, my back cracking with relief. I twisted left in my seat, then right, to try and get the last of the stubborn cracks out. I glanced out of the window, my eyes drawn to the soft glow of the streetlights illuminating the road outside. It was a calm evening, and the quiet hum of the night wrapped around the neighbourhood. Across the road, nestled amidst the darkness, lay a serene park, its trees swaying gently in the breeze. A final forced twist, and accepting I couldn't quite get the last crack, I went to turn back to my screen when something outside caught my attention. A shadowy figure emerged from the depths of the park, slowly shuffling in the direction of my house. Wrapped in darkness, I struggled to focus on the large silhouette. It looked like a large animal, though what exactly I'm not sure. In the dimly lit surroundings, I squinted my eyes as I strained to make out the details. It appeared as though the animal had antlers or something similar on its head, though in the darkness it was too hard to be sure. As I waited for it to reach the area of the park that was illuminated, the streetlights flickered and then abruptly went dark, casting the entire street into an eerie blackness. Staring out into the darkness, my heart skipped a beat and a shiver ran down my spine. A few seconds passed by when the silence of the night was shattered by an ear-piercing scream. Even though my windows were closed, my body automatically reacted, my hands shooting straight up to cover my ears. Moments later, the screaming stopped and the streetlights flickered back to life. With a slight tremor in my hands, I nervously glanced back at the park, hoping to catch a glimpse of the figure once more. Yet there was nothing there. The park stood still, devoid of any movement or signs of life. I breathed out the breath I had been holding in and tried to calm myself. The scream was likely some wild animal, a large possum or owl, I assured myself. And the large animal probably got spooked when the lights cut out, causing it to run back to the tree line on the other side of the park. My stomach rumbled, providing a welcome distraction. I checked the time to find out it was already past 11 p.m. and I hadn't eaten, so I left my laptop in my room and headed downstairs to the kitchen to raid the fridge. I hadn't cooked anything the night before, so there were no leftovers, and the freezer was full of raw meat and frozen vegetables, which would take too long to defrost and cook, so I settled on the idea of making a sandwich. I was shuffling some old iceberg lettuce out the way to see what was hidden behind it, when the lights in the kitchen suddenly started flickering before cutting out. leaving only the fridge light to illuminate the room. I sighed, annoyed that this was still happening. My landlord had assured me that they had fixed the issue with the fuse box overloading, but obviously they were full of it. I opened the drawer in the kitchen island and fished around for the small flashlight I kept in there. The fuse box is in the basement, and there are no windows down there, making it pitch black when the power is out. Finally, finding the torch, I pulled it out and clicked it on to make sure it was working. The focused beam was strong, and it lit up the area it was directly focused on, but the rest of the room was still caked in shadows. I left the fridge door open, the extra light was comforting, and made my way to the basement door in the corridor. I kept the basement door locked, as I rarely go down there, but I keep the key in the lock so I never have to hunt it out. Turning the key, I heard the lock retract and felt the door move slightly. Grabbing the handle, I felt a cold rush of air as I swung the door open. I shone the light down the wooden stairs to the cold concrete floor, revealing a narrow path leading deeper into the darkness. The beam of the flashlight seemed to fade as it reached the bottom of the stairs, as if reluctant to explore what lay ahead. The chill in the air made me hesitate for a moment, but hunger pushed me forward, urging me to reset the fuse box so I can get back to sorting something to eat. Taking a deep breath, I carefully descended the stairs, my footsteps echoing through the silence of the basement. The air grew heavier as I ventured deeper, and an eerie sensation crawled up my spine, tingling with a hint of unease. I put this down to the story I had been working on all night, which made me smile. If the story was leaving this sort of impression on me, and I wrote it, I couldn't wait to get it published and see the effect it had on those who read it. As I reached the bottom step, I paused to listen. I hadn't realized how quiet it was down here. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator upstairs. The basement always seemed larger in the dark, stretching out before me like an underground labyrinth. Old, rusted shelves, stacked side by side like the library, were covered in dusty boxes and forgotten relics, most of which were the landlord's. The fuse box was mounted on a large beam in the middle of the basement, behind one of the rows of shelves. I worked my way around, being careful to avoid any loose items that could trip me up. The last thing I needed was to fall and injure myself. I rounded the corner of the shelf and spotted the mounted fuse box about halfway down the row. I continued forward, swatting away some low-hanging cobwebs as I went, when a rattle made me freeze. In the silence of the basement, the rattle was loud, reverberating around from all sides. I swung the torch around, my heart rate elevating. Sweat started to form on my forehead, even though the room was icy cold. I swung the torch back and forward, in between the shelves and down the row I was in. My heart was pounding in my ears now, as my torch beam caught something moving between the shelves. I tried to aim the light at it through the shelf, but it was elusive and always seemed to evade the beam. Maybe it was nothing but some dancing shadows from the torch beam, I assured myself. I realized I'd been holding my breath and let it out, calming down a little. Convinced I was overreacting, I slowly started towards the fuse box again, still flicking my beam left and right as I walked. I arrived at the fuse box as my heart rate continued to drop, setting the flashlight down on a nearby shelf and examined the panel. The fuses seemed intact, and nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Perplexed, I tried flipping a few switches, hoping to solve the mystery and restore the lights. Something clicked. In an instant, the room was bathed in a soft, comforting glow. Relief washed over me as I reached for the flashlight, switching it off and tucking it safely into my pocket. Eager to escape the eerie atmosphere of the basement, I started back down the row and back around towards the stairs. but just as I reached the bottom step, a sudden flicker in the lights caught my attention. Before I could react, darkness enveloped the room once more, plunging me into an impenetrable black void. Feeling a mix of frustration and apprehension, I fumbled around in my pocket, searching for the flashlight. As I grabbed it and pulled it out of my pocket, I froze as a shiver ran down my spine. All alone, in the cold, dark void of the basement, a warm breath fell on the back of my neck, sending a chill through the very core of my being. I felt it again, closer this time, as I heard a low, guttural rumble come from behind me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt weak and wobbly. Summoning the little courage I had, I spun around, flicking the torch on and shining the light at whatever had been just behind me. But the light just danced along the walls and floors, revealing nothing but packed shelves in the basement. My heart pounded in my chest, the silence broken only by the sound of my uneven breaths. Then, in the darkness, a shape moved behind the shelves. It was a huge silhouette, wide and tall, seemingly hunching over but still almost touching the ceiling with what looked to be horns. 3 crooked horns. I wanted to scream, but nothing but a pathetic whimper escaped my lips as I turned and ran up the stairs. I slammed the door behind me, but in the process accidentally jolted the key free. It clanged across the floor, and try as I might, I couldn't find it in the torch beam. Down in the basement, I heard the stairs creak as something heavy started to ascend. Panicking, I looked around even faster, but the key was nowhere to be seen. Whatever was in the basement was about halfway up, based on the scraping of the walls and the thudding of the heavy footsteps. "Fuck this," I said in a panic and took off, running for the front door. I could hear the beast almost at the top of the steps. As I reached the front door, I quickly unlocked it, swung it open, and stepped out into the dark night. I took about 3 steps onto the front path and stopped. It was a dark night. Too dark. There was no light anywhere except that of my tiny torch. No street lamps, no house lights, no stars. It was a pitch black nothingness beyond the reach of my torch beam, and the path in front of me, it dropped off like a cliff into a black void that seemed to absorb the light of my torch beam. There was nowhere to go. Suddenly, tormented screams broke the silence of the night, coming from all around me. With seemingly no other choice, I turned back to the house and ran back up the steps to the still open front door. I ran straight for the stairs and up to my room, slamming the door shut behind me, locking it, and wedging my drawers between the door and the end of my bed. I don't know how I'll get this message out, but I had to write it down. I had to try and warn you. The screams are getting louder, and that beast is at my door. It's been there for the last 20 minutes, just standing out there, slowly banging. I know it could get through whenever it wants. I have a feeling it wants me to post this warning. Maybe that's how it finds its next victims, through the knowledge of its existence. I don't know. Don't look for this demon. Don't read the book in my room if you find it. In fact, maybe it's better if I don't post this, to protect you all. But the screams, they just keep getting louder. That was an original horror by yours truly, One More Nightmare. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing. And as always, stay tuned for One More Nightmare.